Good evening and welcome to this online debate on the role of contemporary arts in building a fair European culture of memory. Thank you all for being with us. Special thanks to Professor Dragicevic, our speaker tonight, and to Simina Batika for moderating the discussion, which is part of our online lecture series, Envisioning Europe. Professor Dragicevic is a true expert in tonight's subject matter. She teaches cultural policy and management, cultural studies and media studies. She is Professor Emeritus and former president at the University of the Arts in Belgrade, and she has been guest lecturer at universities all over the world. She is also the founder of the UNESCO Chair in Interculturalism, Arts Management and Mediation. Tonight she will argue, among other things, on the importance of embedding social fairness, equality, cultural rights and values in national and European remembrance policies and practices. Dear participants, memories are subjective. There are personal and historical events we like to remember and events we rather prefer to forget. Memories can change with the context and they can be manipulated. They can motivate revenge, but also, on the other hand, reconciliation. At the societal level, their subjective character often leads to memory conflicts or a memory competition between different victim groups, for example. Here at the House of European History, we have experienced firsthand how divisive memories can be, for example, through the reactions of visitors to our permanent exhibition and the representation of their sufferings there. This selectiveness at individual and societal level might also partially explain why we deal adequately with some memories and perhaps inadequately with others. In a debate we organized about 2 years ago, African historian Ruri Hamzai Karumbira noted the difficult conversation on colonial memory in Europe. She attributed this to the fact that in the eyes of the general public, colonialism happened outside Europe. Contrary to the Holocaust, for example, when one can still see and visit the death camps, there are only few material reminders of the crimes of colonialism in Europe. I'm quoting, "What comes back is the chocolate and the coffee," the African historian observed. Let's also not forget that the story of colonialism up until very recently had been written by the colonizer's pen. Dear Professor, dear participants, memory is at the heart of our museum, of the House of European History. Like a red thread, it connects the narrative of our exhibition. A visit kicks off with a reflection about the concept of memory, about what we forget and what we remember. This is followed by the different ways of dealing with the painful memory of the Holocaust after the Second World War, which then leads into current memory conflicts that followed the fall of the Iron Curtain. In short, the House of European History is a place where shared and divided memories of the 20th century are compared, confronted, connected, and shared. And by going beyond memory conflicts, our museum becomes a reflective space in which memories can be explored for the multidirectional impact they have on each other. I am certain that tonight's lecture and ensuing debate will further explore these memory-related issues, which are at the core of our museum. I would like to thank you once more for listening, and I wish you a very fruitful debate, and I now hand over to Professor. Thank you for listening.
That Constance was mentioning are part already of my PowerPoint presentation. I have a very difficult task that in 30 minutes try to discuss, can European culture of memory become more fair, more with equity, more respecting rights of small groups, of forgotten groups? And something that I would like to bring is how contemporary arts are contributing. And sometimes I think that artists are more brave and more challenging and bringing some issues to us prior to social sciences and humanities and history science. So here on the screen you see three European research that my University of Arts is part of. And from each of the three, I will bring some elements in this lecture. In fact, I would like to start with one quotation of Stuart Hall, that heritage inevitably reflects the governing assumption of its time and context. So think about it today when we are again on the edge of a new, I don't know to say, would it be a war or again kind of a Cold War in between Ukraine and Russia? But power and authority of those who have colonized the past, whose versions of history matter, are still today present in different nations, in different national contexts, and they are really never asking who is the heritage for, because they think they know the answer. The heritage is for their nation within the nation state. So now in Europe, I think it's the high time to really discuss, can we have a European common heritage, European common memory, not only linked to those things that are labeled? And can we imagine society without those titles that Daniel Baker, UK Roma traveler, was exhibiting in Roma Pavilion in Venice? And that's also something to think about. Venice Biennial, the most important manifestation of visual arts in Europe, is a nation state. Roma has been allowed only twice to have their own pavilion because they do not have a state. And we, cultural people, artists, and all of us who participate in this Venice Biennial logic, we never question those that impose such a rule, that artists can only represent his nation state, not his people. So it doesn't give really chance for minorities of different European countries to be represented. On the other side, as a cultural policy scholar, I would like to point out that politics of memory is not studied within cultural policy. Even in Compendium of Cultural Policies and Practices that was derived from Council of Europe, a big project of evaluation of cultural policy, there are lots of criteria that authors of the evaluation of cultural policy for each specific European country, including its wider Europe, it's Europe of Council of Europe, are writing, does not refer to memory policy, politics of oblivion, and so on. And that is something very strange. And that is something that we as cultural policy scholars will have to change. National interests are still today prevailing in recreating culture of memory, and they absolutely include politics of forgetting, different form of practices of oblivion, especially for those things that we are ashamed of, that are representing our negative past, such as colonialism. Thus, it puts specific responsibilities on European institutions, museums, this House of European History, and so on, European Cultural Network, and all academics in social sciences and humanities to open unsolved, controversial, dissonant issues of culture of memory. And it is actual. Look today, all these conflicts in between Northern Macedonia and Greece, about Northern Macedonia and Bulgaria, are exactly about memory, identity, key persons of the past, to whom they belong, to Macedonians or to Bulgarians, and so on. Conflicts in Croatia and Serbia, recent ones around Dubrovnik literature, Bosnia and Herzegovina with both Croatia and Serbia. And I would I could continue endlessly. And that's a work that I just like to present through photo. It was a performance, and it exists on the website as video performance of Maja Bajevic, Sarajevo artist that is today kind of a French-Bosnian artist. Art has to be national, an artist has to be national, but in fact, it's a very ironic and critical artistic work that shows how it's say senseless of this nationalization of both heritage and of the arts. And this was just a paraphrase of the performance of Marina Abramovic from 75. Art must be beautiful and artist must be beautiful. But when we speak about past, my usual question when I'm teaching in France, I'm asking French students when slavery in France was prohibited. And no one knows the answer, and they never thought about it. And they usually look at me, we didn't have slaves. But then, of course, yeah, we have them somewhere far away. So it must be stopped in at least during French bourgeois revolution. In fact, it was not. And how many Belgian pupils and students are learning about Belgian colonialism by reading some books like The Dream of the Celt of Mario Vargas Llosa, because not really everything comes through their scholar system. How we, the people today, understand the guilt of our ancestors? Do we have our European Karl Jaspers? But look how it was translated in English. Just to make no doubts, the question of German guilt, the original title, just speak about guilt. In my language, this book was translated about guilt. And when we read it, it refers to all nations, to all of us. It's not about the German guilt. It's only about German guilt. It's philosophy of responsibility. And that's one important issue that I would like that we discuss tonight. The other is a right of subaltern memories to be incorporated in European memory. And I will tell that exactly about right to a memory, poraimos. We always speak about Holocaust, but Holocaust refers specifically to genocide to Jewish community. Why then we are not speaking about Holocaust and poraimos? And when this monument on the right side in Berlin was opened to poraimos in Berlin, it was announced as the first ever monument to poraimos, to Gypsy Roma victims of the World War II of Nazism. However, I put here two more monuments, and you can see by specifically raised for Roma victims in the Second World War, in Kragujevac in 68, in Leskovac in 73. It's a project of one of the most famous monument artists of Yugoslavia, Bogdan Bogdanovic. So, but even those monuments, I have to say, are forgotten. Not only that they are not incorporated in European remembrance space. Most of my students never heard for them. In city of Leskovac, people would have problems to take you there because it's out of the city. It's exactly on the memory site when more than thousands Roma from a very small community of Leskovac had been killed. So I would really like that we discuss what is European common, shared heritage, and can we share common memories? But for that, we need a discursive sphere where we can discuss tangible, intangible, digital heritage, but also really public policy strategies and actions. I looked at the UNESCO World Lists. They're also national lists. Every heritage that is declared there is the national heritage. So is a Roma heritage on any of those lists? At least I assumed might be on intangible heritage. I found only two, but in both, it was not a Roma cultural heritage. It was flamenco as Spanish and some dance as lead dance, as Romanian lead dance. And in both cases, there was a small bracket down there in the text that these dances are also practiced by Roma community. So that's only how you can find them, basically in footnote. So that's something that we have to think about. But when we speak about one issue, like for example, Kosovo battle, is this the same concept? Is this the same memory? For us in Serbia, when someone say Kosovo battle, it's a battle from 1389. If you address Albanian population on Kosovo and speak about Kosovo battle, they speak about 1999. So you can see that even about certain concepts and so on, we have different remembrance. We understand different things. But then, is heritage always positive? What about the negative past? What about heritage of violence? What about dissonant heritage? What about heritage that might be considered pride of one, but absolute nightmare for another community? And who are agents, participants of discursive communities that are going to debate this heritage? And do we have strength to debate controversial memory? Even Museum of Terror in Budapest might be considered quite controversial, at least among scholars that I have debated with. Lotte Movement Museum in Finland was really, I was brought in this museum with the conference participants on 9th of May, the day of Europe, victory, anti-fascism, and so on. Why organizers brought us there? Lotte Museum is a museum of the movement who developed in 30s under swastika sign. And they were keeping saying to us, they never kept the gun in their hands. But fascism starts with words. It's about wording, it's about discourse. And then, okay, in traditional societies, men are going to keep guns, but it doesn't mean that certain movements that are developed within swastika signs have to be supported. So basically, that's something that I'm in my research mostly engaged. And I found how we are dealing with difficult past, how we in Serbia deal with Srebrenica genocide. First of all, we deal that we are avoiding to use the word genocide. We just say terrible crime. And who are writing about it? Basically, no scholars are avoiding these topics. Why they should deal with this kind of difficult topics. But who dares? Art is there. And you can see here on the picture, the Dach Theater group, the group that survives, that is resilient without public money, surviving in Belgrade for 30 years because of their treating of the negative past, of difficult issues, and so on. Rare were governments in between 2000 and 2005 that could support their art projects that are dealing with complex past. But culture of memory, as I said, is not only important for interstate conflicts, it's really equally important for internal relations with subaltern, with minority groups, for gender relations. in our museums, for example, throughout the Balkans, representation of women in history museum is very, very weak. It's paradox, it's much better in art museums because women artists since 19th century had fighted for their position and had been acknowledged, but not women politicians, not women social workers, not women educational workers. They are still not deserving their places in our museums. That is the reason why I think that in international cultural relations also things have to change, like a change in Swedish memory policy. So they created virtual Women History Museum. We want to do it same in the Balkans because we cannot now buy or collect artifacts. They're spread mostly in depots of different museums. But if we digitalize them, we can create virtual women museum at least that doesn't need that much money. Or what else? There are many other issues that can be done, but that's something to be conceptualized because also public memory is controlled. It's controlled by different regimes, by different authorities. It's not a gaze from below. It is gaze from above. And I will show you just even British policy, sorry, to show this. But this campaign, Great Britannia, with Henry VIII with his sixth wife, is this really great heritage? Is really the most important heritage of UK to be celebrated? I just think it was not thought of. Thus, probably the other artifact in the other project, because they had also Cool Britannia. Both, just to say, both campaigns are state regime campaigns in order to raise tourism, economy, etc., etc. But however, this Cool Britannia is more acceptable definitely than this imperial, which was imperial even within their own, how would say, borders. Quickly, now, usually you in Western Europe, those of you who live or Northern Europe, you think that the question of nation state and nationalism was resolved in 19th century. We in the Balkans, we assist to it now. Baltic countries, they had their 20 years after split from Soviet Union and so on. So what are these poetics and politics of representation? Mostly it's about victimization. Every of us, new nations, I mean, none is really new, but new nations in the state, in the rise, are claimed that we are the greatest victims of the history, on the crossroads of the civilizations and so on. Second issue is denial. The third is megalomania, and here I always quote one important essay of Jan Józef Lipski, Two Patriotism, Two Fatherlands, the national megalomania and xenophobia in Poland. But when I translated this in Serbian, everyone in Serbia thought that it's my text about Serbia today. It looks so actual. Jan Józef Lipski has written that in the 60s in Poland. So what's going on in the Balkans today? In Albania and Kosovo, illyrization, going back 3rd, 2nd century before Christ. Montenegro also. Northern Macedonia and Bulgaria, antiquization, they are antiques, the more antique one than another. Serbia and Bosnia, it's medievalization. How it looks like artistically? It looks anonymously because no real artist want to participate in this. You see illyrization. Here you see antiquization and aesthetics, and that's recent, that's now. Here you see medievalization. They couldn't find our authorities, artists in Serbia, so they employed Russian one, Rukavishnikov. So you see, this is because why not? He will make any sculpture he is asked for. Montenegro, the same. The only difference is one artist appeared in the middle of all those battles, but also as a constructor. Emir Kusturica, you see him on those caricatures, that he created one, how would say, imaginary village somewhere near Visegrad in Bosnia. But that's again something that is construction of identities. I would like also to take, although I know that we don't have enough time to go deeply in that, just to suggest that you go, those of you that are interested in Paul Connerton's policies of types of forgetting. And he identified basically these 7 types of forgetting: repressive, erasure, or prescriptive. When we try as society to forget with the help of goddess Lita, in order to secure better future. But in fact, he forgot to, for me and my colleague that we researched this issue in the Balkans, 2 major reasons of official forgetting policies. It's shameful silence. When we know that we should be ashamed of something, then we put it in oblivion. Or confused silence. We don't know what to say to our authorities about it, so let's put that in oblivion. And why? I will just show you on something that every single nation could be very proud, or every single city. This monument, raised by women of city of Čačak in 1934, was called Monument of Forfeit. The Women Association of City of Čačak insisted that bones of all soldiers from all armies, occupator and our liberation army in the World War I, should be buried on the same place. They are all sons of some mother and so on. And they put this monument of forfeit in 34. During Second World War, Nazis, of course, occupators insisted for David Star to be removed. But then Serbian helpers, collaborators, they removed this crescent, which was a sign of a Muslim community in Serbia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, in the Balkans, and so on. When the monument was, and then monument after Second World War went in oblivion. Why? Just because the new communist regime wanted to say that they are the only one who fight for brotherhood and unity, and that respect all faith, ethnic differences equally. So none of us knew about this monument till 2007, when one artist, Irena Kelečević, decided to use invitation for the Biennial of the Art in this same city and to reconstruct this monument. And that's how it, after being silenced heritage, it became known, shared heritage of all community. Many artists today are dealing with, for example, socialist heritage. Now, everything that belonged to Yugoslavia, to socialism, even the good things are forgotten. So one Croatian artist, Igor Grubich, he came to Serbia and made one of his famous projects with the labor class that still exists partially in Serbia, of these workers, angels with dark faces, according. Or another artist, Mrđan Bajić, he dared to make big sculptures on what used to be the pride of Yugoslavian labor class. It was first this small car called Fića, as a diminutive of Fiat, but later on it became Zastava, later on 101, later on Jugo. Jugo, car, authentic, Yugoslavian, exported to, it was called the business of the century and so on. No one today even remembers. Thus, films like Jugo short autobiography or Croatian film about Zastava 101 car, like authentic socialist products, can be seen only in art galleries, not in museums, not in a... But the question is a transfer possible from artivist actions to public memory policies? Can artistic actions such as this one of Milica Tomic, it's also a steal from her video where she's turning around and speaking in all languages, correct. So she's speaking, I'm Milica Tomic, I'm Vietnamese, in Vietnamese. And I'm Milica Tomic, I'm Albanian, in Albanian, and it lasts quite a long half an hour until she recites all this name, and her body becomes, after this nationalistic expressions, every moment bloodier and bloodier. And she did this performance and video before Amin Malouf, for example, has written his very famous book, Les Identités Meurtrières, Killing Identities. And I think that artists such as Amin Malouf, for example, in France, or Jochen Gertz in Germany, or Heiner Müller in Germany again, are extremely important as part of this collective intelligence about launching in this European discursive space ideas and necessity for civic engagement. And here on the right side, you see the photo of the monument against fascism that Jochen Gertz did with his students in Saarbrücken, where they explored that there is 2,154, for example, Jewish cemeteries that do not exist in Germany anymore because there is no community anymore. So they have been cutting in these cobblestones name and returning this overnight. This is one of many counter monuments that Jochen Gertz had succeeded to establish throughout the Europe, even in Paris, in Hamburg, in Austria. By the way, in Graz, when the right wing got the power, the first thing they did, they removed this monument. Now the left are again in Graz, and I hope they're going to return this Gertz monument. He called them counter monuments because they deal with negative past. You saw all this regime monuments of illyrization, antiquization, medievalization, and so on, that are thought to conquer public space and to conquer public memory. Here, he's doing something much more subtle and very, how to say, important to raise awareness of the people of the issues. So we are now reaching more toward conclusions. Yes, its European memories have to be based on shared experiences, but they need also spaces that some provocative issues can be discussed, that both policies of memory and forgetting can be discussed, because retelling the past might be a powerful mechanism for generating a collective sense of identity in a complex society such as Europe. Here I'm quoting the words of Milija Gluhović, who has written a very important book, Performing European Memories, and he made extremely important analysis of theater and drama working on European memories, because some memories are really put in oblivion, and even the people that are still alive, for example, Greek Civil War, for different reasons. In Serbia, for example, why we don't speak about Greek Civil War? Because we are ashamed. To receive UK credits in 1950, we had to make blockade in between Greece and Yugoslavia and stop supplying both arms and food to Greek partisans. So what they have to do, they sent their children through Bulgaria to Soviet Union. Those children returned as old 90-year-old people to Greece in 90s. Those that have been of Slavic origin had returned during Khrushchev time only in 60s. And they stayed as apatrides for 10, 15 years. Luckily, many of them, Yugoslav socialist system enabled many of them, to those children without patria, which would never be, still today, they cannot go to Greece. That's interesting. That was the only visa we needed of Western Europe in 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s was Greek visa. Why? Just to see if your place of birth is on the territory of Greece, you are denied Greek visa. So none of my friends, artists, Borailovsky or Dimitar Malidanov, could see their native villages in Greece. And one of them died recently, so he will never have a chance. So what is our task? To bring counter narratives, new stories, ideas, visions. And here I have to remind one very old book from Council of Europe, In From the Margins. Please, let's go to the margins of European society and collect narratives of alternative paths, of intercultural dialogue, create a new Europe of remembrance, not just Europe of, you know, this pompous word, sustainability, resilience, employability, etc., that even we researchers have to put in our research projects in order to secure grants. That is the reason why I think is very important to see how arts is performing European and national memories. How, for example, works of Heiner Müller, of Tadeusz Kantor, for example, of Pinter, of Wajda, Żmijewski, and I could cite many of them, are dealing with important issues that are sometimes completely forgotten. And maybe that's a moment to close. Theater narratives have to become social narratives. I would like to see, for example, this performance of Heiner Müller, The Task, not only in Germany or in United States, but in France, but to be seen by teenagers, by young population, to understand that France was not always and everywhere the country of enlightenment, to understand emotions of humiliation. If you as a French go today in Mali, for example, if in Algeria and so on, that cannot be done if in the narrative of Europe, colonizer is bringing knowledge, is bringing education. Just look in New Caledonia, for example, when the first native became teacher and when became lawyer. Lawyer was only recently. So it's not about the enlightenment process. Colonization was very, very cruel. So sometimes it's really artists that have to hang themselves. This is the same Milica Tomic that you see with the blood on her. Here, she is hanging herself as fascists were hanging 6 anti-fascists in 1941 on the Belgrade public square. and people were just walking, don't want to see, don't want to watch, don't want to be remembered or being collaborators. So the most difficult, the most brave, the most important to recreate common European memory is to start discussing honestly about guilt, but not only German guilt or Serbian guilt, about guilt and when and how we Europeans were guilty and why today many processes are still enhanced by this colonial behavior of maybe not that many years ago. We still have, many European countries are still having some small colonies. So there is a lot of controversial issues, and unless we don't speak about them, we are not going to have Europe that is Europe of values, human rights, that can, with the, we say usually with the open front, to lobby for respecting to human rights around the world. If we do not respect human rights of Sami population, that's my second most popular questions to the students when I'm teaching in Global North. Have you met ever a Sami artist? And usually students don't even know who Sami people are and where they are living. And usually I say they live in 3 most richest European countries plus Russia. So they're spread in 4 countries because when the countries were created, no one was thinking about them, and they are right. That's their land for thousands of years. But we have to show at least respect and try to integrate in our society all those silent minorities who been pretty silent up to now. But it's not that we have to wait that they are demanding their rights. We have to give rights to everyone on the territory of Europe. And these rights concern also a right to remembrance, right to be present in museums, in school books, in textbooks, in libraries, everywhere where the memory is enhanced. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Dragicevic. It was truly fascinating to hear you talk and to go through a lot of topics that are of very much concern to us here at the House of European History, but I also think to many of the people who are in our audience. So there have been many people with us tonight, and they have already posted their questions. So I would postpone mine and start with some of the questions that we have from the audience to see where this discussion goes. So I would like to start with a very broad one, but also broad and difficult. So it's a question from Laia Puig, who is a cultural manager from Barcelona. And she says, if you were to pick only one, what would you say is the most urgent memorial issue in Europe today?
It's always very difficult to choose anything that is only one. But let's say...
And she did say urgent, so not important. It's not a question of importance of our waste, but urgency, let's say.
From my perspective, for example, what is urgent? Urgent is to reconciliate with world outside of Europe, but neglecting, I will just quote one, Dominique Moissy has written a fantastic book called Geopolitics of Emotion, and I use it very much throughout my speech. But among other things that he has written in this book about hope, fear, and so on, he said, for example, Arab literature is not known, or second issue, second phrase, India just stepped on the world stage today when the BRICS country has been created. India stepped on the world stage with Gandhi. Even during colonialism, it was a world country. With Jawaharlal Nehru, it created non-aligned movement. Nasser from Egypt also. And the fact that art and literature of Arab country is not known, it's really absolutely, how would say, especially in France, is a statement which is very suspicious. So what is the most urgent is, don't pretend that outside Europe is insignificant, didn't have history, or that they just now appear to be some country to be considered. So the most urgent memory issue is valorize memories of Afghanistan. But if you did so, you wouldn't attack Afghanistan the way you did. I mean, speaking now about everyone. If we would know the history of Vietnam, for example, that was the only country that Mongols hadn't succeeded to conquer, then both French and Americans should be more intelligent not to try to conquer Vietnam. But we ignore, and we want to ignore all the others, histories of others. So yes, I'm now very much, and I think it's really urgent to rewrite world history. Even Europe, we don't know even European history if it is not Western. Le Grand Duchesse de Lithuanie. How many people knows how big Lithuania used to be? We only know small Lithuania of today. But, and I'm not speaking that to flatter any of national megalomania, but just this nombrilism, this European hermetism that the history exists on the territory of Europe. And that's the reason I mentioned Moisy, because if the scholars of that level and of that rank can say that India just stepped on the world stage, and even with Narendra Modi, it's offensive for Indian people. That raises hatred and everything else from India intelligentsia toward the global north.
Thank you for this answer. And I will go on with a question from Ines Tlili. I hope I pronounced the name correctly. And this is also a difficult one because it deals with cancel culture.
Oh.
Name or tag that appeared recently. And she asks, does cancel culture bring the right answer, and the right is in quotation marks, of course, to the reconsideration of heritage? In other words, how could we promote heritage and denounce the atrocity that has been made through centuries? So I think I put the right intonation because I can understand the question in this way. So how can we do both? Like not
because I understand complexity, and that's also my ethical dilemma. And even before cancel culture, I remember our discussion being a big group of Yugoslav students in Paris in 70s, end of 70s. And then we discussed how to translate the most famous book of Montenegro, but that's Montenegrin Serbian culture, from the beginning of 19th century in French or in English. And that was the moment that we've been frozen. None of us, because the book is written in old language, so you just don't think it's kind of epical language of the old stories and so on. But when you try to translate it, it says subtitle is against how to lead a genocide against Muslims, against those who converted to Muslims. That's specific. So when it says in our language, in this old-fashioned way, it's a kind of a, okay, these that were, I would say, accepting the religion of Turks, of conqueror, of course, the people are going to fight against them and so on. But it was really called istraga. And istraga is a word that's kind like to kill them all. So that's genocide, basically. And then we discussed how we really should discuss about it and teach that, because we never in school, no teacher ever raised this issue. And me being educated in Belgrade, not in a mixed community, for example, in South Serbia, I never, as a child, I never asked myself how Bosniak Muslim child is perceiving those verses. So I'm not for cancel culture. So like abolish that from the school reading. This was the book, the basic book, epic poem of our Montenegrin and Serbian culture. And we have to learn that. But it has to be contextualized. It has to be, how to say, discussed. We, the pupils, have to be warned about those, how to say, terms and so on. So we have to learn about those controversies. We have to read Margaret Mitchell as promoting, I mean, half of this literature and films of that time were promoting these so-called Southern values that were values of slavery society. But yes, monuments can be removed, not probably destroyed, but removed, put in museums, put as testimonies on a certain period, and always contextualized. So I'm not for destruction, for how to say, putting bans on some works, but to better contextualization, and especially in sensitive, because in sensitive multicultural societies, those works of art that were canonized once upon a time have to be put in question and have to have their historical place, but not to be promoted as contemporary values today.
Thank you so much for this. I will continue with a question that speaks very much to the Roma examples that you gave in your lecture. So this comes from a PhD scholar in Romania, Adrian Nicolae Furtuna, who is working on the social memory of Roma slavery. And he asks, who can influence more, in your opinion, the public discourse, the artivists or the academia?
To be very honest, when I heard for the first time about Roma slavery in Romania, that was 20 years ago, I didn't believe this Roma, because I thought that he little bit invented that to justify the fact that he was only one on the course that he didn't speak Roma. Because I was lecturing group of Roma and I was showing films that were, all of them spoke Serbian, but I put some films that were in Roma language, and all participants spoke Roma. They understood the film except this one. And then he explained to me, you know, we are Romanian Roma. We escaped from Romania to state of Serbia to have a freedom, but we have been as slaves prohibited to speak. That was the first time when I heard. But it was a film that made not only me, confirming now something that I have heard, but most of our society in Europe to hear about slavery of Roma. So I think both are important. Exactly, artists have this opportunity to be heard outside of our own circles. Unfortunately, academia more and more we speak about transdisciplinary, but we are terribly disciplinary. And we are publishing in our journals. So my text about cultural policy and monuments are not read by historians or historians of art, because I'm not publishing in their journals and so on. So I think this kind of gatherings are very important, exactly to be a platform for meeting around issues. The scholars, like doctoral students and so on, with artists and doctoral students from different disciplines. Because, for example, the issue of Roma slavery in Romania can be tackled from the historical issue, can be tackled from the contemporary sociological, etc., etc. Many issues can be, many perspectives can be brought.
Thank you for your answer. If I can only add, as this is also a subject that preoccupies me a lot, is that the film you mentioned, which is Aferim by Radu Jude, would not have been possible without all the solid academic research that founded it. So it's truly a great film, but it would not have been so great if it had not been really based on very solid research.
Knowledge.
Yes. Let's continue with a few more questions, although we don't have so much time. So this is a question about the names of major cultural institutions, and it goes like this. How could states revise policies through which major cultural institutions and funders are named after highly privileged and questionable individuals? And he gives the example of Niarchos Foundation in the Balkans. It doesn't...
Okay.
And he says that this question was triggered by your Great Britannia Henry VIII example, because there are many similar foundations all over Europe.
No, I understand that, but Niarchos and Onassis are private persons. In our country, it's Mr. Scepter. So when they have their foundation, it's their money. It would be different if Greek public money would be given to Niarchos foundations, but I don't think it's the case. But I understand still the problems stay, because can every rich person justify everything this rich person did in life by leaving the property to foundation and then have glorified his name? It's then up to us, researchers, academics, civil society, artists, to explore. I personally have no clue. I know that Niarchos was a rich ship, owner and something like that, but I personally never investigated life of tycoons. So even Onassis wouldn't be known by me if wouldn't be linked to some, let's say, cultural icons in his life.
Okay, one more question from the public, which was from Robert Chungay, who is from Amsterdam but used to live in Zagreb. And he asks the reluctance from richer EU nations to transfer money to the poorer shows the importance of a shared identity. How can we create the wanted common memory while talking about guilt?
Everyone was guilty sometimes, and rich countries especially have to speak about their guilt, which they, except Germany, but Germany was also a little bit pressured by first by our allies, later on by this baby boom generation, 68 generation, let's say, that was brave enough to bring difficult issues of German past. Joachim Gerz is one of this generation to bring this on the surface. But in other countries, I don't see that readiness to face problematic issues of our own past, and even the big nations, they think it's really the issue of the small nations. And that might be only in the Balkans. That would never happen to us. That's the reason why I'm speaking about Haiti, slave revolution, and the way how French army, after French citizen revolution, how would say, went and killed all of them, and the state of Haiti, even after the slavery was abolished later, far later, had to pay to France enormous amount of money for the loss of stopping the slavery. France have to face that, have to face Algeria, have to face, by the way, Cambodia, because why? Because they haven't built any school there. They built schools only in Vietnam, but not in Cambodia. Cambodians would say, like, even colonizers didn't care for us. They haven't left any positive legacy. And that's something that all of our very prominent institutions, Goethe Institute, for example, doesn't have a space in Cambodia. Cambodia deserves our help. Why? Because ruling elites of today has been the one that were deprived of education because all schools have been closed during Khmer Rouge regime. So they didn't have possibility to be educated and so on. While if you look about unique, does they exist there? No, French Institute only. No British Council, no Goethe Institute, no Italian, no, name it, Cervantes. Why? Because Cambodia, 80% village rural population, not industrial nation, no middle class, no market, no consumption, not interesting. Vietnam, 100 million people, not 10, but 100. Huge industrial nation, big market, a lot of interest, all foreign agencies, cultural agencies. I'm not speaking about economic. Normal that they are there, but even cultural. We do not, that's what I want to say, we do not behave fair in international relations on a cultural level.
Mm-hmm. My last question would be, and this comes from me, because we have, unfortunately, we have to close the chat, so we are not accepting any more questions, and we will also have to end our conversation very soon. It's along the, of course, the lines of what we have been discussing, and the fact that, yes, we have become more attentive to the peripheries, and we want to include them, and we want to have this inclusive European memory. My question is, how do we define these peripheries, and how do we make sure that some communities and some stories actually are not totally lost? I am just thinking now, just for example, of the hundreds, I think, maybe more, of languages that are lost in Europe, of the communities which didn't, I was triggered by what you said at the beginning about Roma not having a state and thus not having the right to many forms of representation. But Roma is, in a way, almost a success example, which we like to give, because we are bringing more and more of Roma memory and Roma culture to our representations of European memory and history. But how can we try, at least, not to lose other types of peripheries, and not to give this right to memory, as you said, this right to remembrance, to communities that are not, they don't even identify as an ethnic community, which seems to be unfortunately still the standard that was set centuries ago, but we still play a bit by this, and we are losing a lot of peripheries. This is what
we have those multiple peripheries. Peripheries are not only geographical ones, so they might be in the center of the centrum. I don't know the English term for Sorbs from Lužice, Lužički Srbi, that's middle of Germany, but that's disappearing. And many other small, let's say, ethnic groups and so on. But here, when I speak about fair European memory, I will tell something also. I'm teaching for 30 years on European Diploma in Cultural Project Management. It's a program that gathers every year, let's say, around 20-25 Europeans. And sometimes we start facing 2 by 2, how they sit, and we just say, turn to each other and tell to each other, what do you know about each other culture? And then, of course, happy Slovaks, Czechs, Poles, Russians, and all others, if they sit next to German, French, Italian, Spain, they know everything. But poor French look at the Slovak, like start thinking, however, trying to repeat all Slavic names, but then he realized that all these Slavic names somehow are, however, Russian. So then they realize that they don't know any of the Slovak arts, culture, anything. A little bit for French is easier when Romanian comes, because at least they have 5-6 Romanians that lived in Paris, and that they know by French pronunciation, not original Romanian name pronunciation from Eliade, Brancusi, and so on. But although the biggest fun was when it was Icelandic girl and Luxembourg boy. And Luxembourg boy was not fond of pop culture. So for him, he looked Iceland like, didn't even remember to say some chess champion there or something. So what I wanted to say is our Ministry of Education are still extremely national. The only one that is not even hiding that is French Ministère d'Éducation Nationale. That's the only ministry in France that has the word national in the title. Just clearly, because culture in France is universal, it's worldwide and so on, but education is national. And most of the education are based on that. So the small nations, they, however, integrate European, I mean, who is going to avoid reading Goethe or Shakespeare or Cervantes and so on? That's obligatory school reading, musicians, Debussy, and etc., etc. But try to see with Smetana or any other strange name, would that appear in English curriculum or in French or in German? Even on university level, that's probably also interesting. In big European countries, faculty libraries, I'm not speaking about big university, but faculty libraries, department libraries are only in their language. That means, and in these cultures, they don't translate much. So Sciences Po, Grenoble, Gestion culturelle, cultural management, no book outside French language. Say in UK, try to find book in French or in German. It's impossible. But in my university library, in my faculty library, you can find even books in Romanian. Not really very much read, but they are there.
Okay, thank you so much on this optimistic note on what can we learn from the periphery. So not only what can we learn to tolerate about the periphery and how we can bring it in, but what we can actually learn and how it can enrich us and how they do things differently, which might might be a
Exactly.
good
This
thing for us to do.
openness of the periphery toward different knowledge, it's very important.
Thank you so much for being here with us. Hope to see you soon in Brussels at the House of European History in real person. And for everyone who is listening here, we are inviting you to Brussels. We are inviting you on our website also to see our online collection, to see our future events, and let's keep this conversation going. Thank you very much, Professor Dragicevic.
Thank you.